So, what's going on? How did we get here? How did we manage to transition from the most beloved franchise in pop culture history to the mess that is the current affairs of Star Wars today? What's going on? Well, us Star Wars fans, we get excited for more Star Wars to come out. And then it does, and what happens? Rehashed plots. Decades of excellent stories were thrown out and unused, and new stories are being released instead with rehashed plots and clearly what are first thought ideas. There's buildup with no release, there's pent up frustration, unfulfilled expectations, anti-climax, misfire of intended outcomes the creators of the films are trying to generate. There's current day political allegory in a galaxy far, far away a long time ago. There's box office flops, there's reshoots, directors switched out mid production, there's divisiveness between fans and critics, as I've already addressed. There's reportedly internet trolling of actors and creators. There's name calling and alienation of upset and critical fans. There's alienation of casual moviegoers. There's an idea that Star Wars isn't for everyone. There's exclusiveness and tribalism. It's a reflection of current day identity politics. Outside of that, within the production of the film themselves, there's script leaks, there's director sabotage, there's embittered performers, there's inner turmoil within the ranks of creators and leaders of the franchise. And there are people within this group that are shilling and are attacking fans for the sake of defending their position and their choices rather than responding to them as their stakeholders. We got Jedi and Sith falling in love. We have Wookiees and Trandoshans living together. I mean, what's the galaxy coming to? Honestly, in my opinion, I think fear of stagnation has led to bad creative choices, which in turn has led to stagnation, which leads in turn in a circle to the fear of stagnation and more bad creative choices. So, what am I ranting about? What's the point of all this, you might be asking? I'll tell you. The point is to examine what's going on, how did this happen, where did this come from, how did we get here, where is this going, and what does the future hold? But more importantly, do the fans of Star Wars have any say? Can we as fans make our voices heard and use our power to shape and influence something that we all feel like we have ownership of? That's what I intend to find out. So, what are my qualifications, you might be asking? Do I work for Access Media? I don't. But I am a lifelong Star Wars fan. I'm what you would call a hardcore Star Wars fan. I've read most of the books that were put out. I've watched all the episodes of the TV shows. I gobbled up anything Star Wars that I could get when I was a kid and an adolescent. I'm a person who goes to the movies. I've seen all of the new Disney Star Wars movies. I've seen everything in the old Lucasfilm canon of films and shows. I went to art school, and I also have a knowledge of critical theory, so I understand the arguments being promoted and the ideology behind them that's being promoted for people who are both for and against different aspects of the new trilogy. So, basically, I'm a fan. As Mark Hamill had said, I'm passionate about Star Wars, I'm intelligent, and I feel a sense of ownership of it. Understanding fans helps you to understand the IP. As in order to be a fan of an IP, something in the IP has to resonate with you. So if you learn to understand the fans of a product or story, you learn to understand what is the appeal of that particular brand or intellectual property. By examining the fans, you not only understand their adverse and conflicting reactions to this current state of affairs with the Disney Star Wars films as a property, but also, by learning to understand the fans, you learn to understand the intellectual property itself, and come to know what in it succeeds or fails, and for what reasons. To truly understand Star Wars, you have to understand its fan base. All of it. Large, multifaceted, and complicated as it is. So, what do Star Wars fans tell us about Star Wars, and what it is? I'm glad you asked. To answer this question, I've made a series of videos examining different types of Star Wars fans and what they can teach us about Star Wars itself. As a fan, I feel that I'm qualified to represent myself and other types of fans. I've spent countless hours endlessly debating originals versus prequels versus sequels versus books. I understand people's points of view. I've talked to people in many different generations. I've talked to people older than myself. I've talked to people younger than myself. I've talked to my peers. I understand how people feel about Star Wars, and it shows in things like how they make their lists ranking movies from best to worst, the kinds of comments that they leave publicly on Twitter, on YouTube, in the blogosphere, the kinds of things that the Axis media is writing and why. Each one is reflective of a certain point of view, or in other words, a certain type of Star Wars fan or audience member. Now, there's more than one type. I'm going to go into the 5 core types of Star Wars fans in this series of videos.